Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome to day 29 of the Ramadan Dua Accelerator. Today's dua is one of the most commonly recited duas from the Quran. It's probably also the most commonly recognized one, though many people might not actually know it's from the Quran. It's one you probably learned when you were a kid or heard in a lecture of some sort. The dua is from Surah Ali Imran and I will jump right into reciting the ayah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. Those who are warned, your enemies have mobilized their forces against you, so fear them. The warning only made them grow stronger in faith, and they replied, Allah alone is sufficient as an aid for us, and He is the best protector. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakil, or you might hear Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil if it's just a person referring to the singular version of this dua, meaning they're just talking about themselves. So, what's the context of this verse specifically? This is actually referring to a time right after the Battle of Uhud. And if you know the history of the Battle of Uhud, the Muslims suffered a really catastrophic loss. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ lost his uncle, he lost friends, and it was a very, very difficult battle for the Muslims. After Uhud had occurred, there was an agreement that took place between Quraysh and the Muslims to ensure another battle. And a place was agreed upon where they would meet. And the Muslims, despite having suffered this such horrible loss with so many casualties, agree to continue with the battle. And what ends up happening is they start getting whispers in their ear from people. And the Quran scholars say that the people who were warning the Muslims, saying this, saying your enemies have mobilized their forces against you, so fear them, might have been the munafiqeen, right? The hypocrites, those who claimed to be Muslims, but truly in their hearts they weren't Muslims. They were just playing both sides, hoping that they would be able to gain favor with whoever would end up being in power. And they are the first group of people who are going to be entering hellfire. They say that the warning only made them grow stronger in faith, meaning when they were being told you can't do this, you're not going to beat them, they've gathered groups. The Muslims didn't falter. Their faith grew stronger. And this likely is also probably coming after the Prophet ﷺ boosted their morale after this catastrophic loss. And the fact of the matter is, the Battle of Uhud was a very important battle for the Iman of the believers who were battling, because it was the first time they were essentially introduced to the idea that Islam is supposed to be a faith that you believe in regardless of if your prophet is with you or not. And so, subhanAllah, we are the ones that are living in this time without our prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, among us. He's no longer alive, obviously. Whereas the Sahaba were living with the Prophet ﷺ among them. They could go ask him questions, they could learn from him. And so, the Battle of Uhud was that first time, because rumors were being spread on the battlefield that the prophet was no longer alive, that he had been killed. First time that people had to reconcile this idea of, wait a minute, we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't worship the Prophet ﷺ. And it was also a preparation for them mentally for the fact that the prophet was going to die, and many of them would bear witness to that. And it would now lend itself to the new challenge of how do we ensure that Islam continues without people falling for Shaitan's trick of making them think that because Muhammad is dead, Islam is no longer, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Islam is no longer required. That being said, the Sahaba had a new lease on their Iman, so to speak, right? They now had a new boost in their morale. They understood that we are not battling for the Prophet, we are battling for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of Allah, fi sabilillah. Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil is an incredible dua because, first of all, the answer to it is all encompassing. It's truly incredible. And if you are in a situation where you are scared or overwhelmed, it's a challenge that you feel you cannot overcome, then know that this is the dua to memorize and say. You essentially just hand over the reins to Allah. You get to a point where you realize nothing I'm going to do is going to make a difference. I need Allah. I need Allah to, and we always are in need of Allah. I keep saying this in the series. We always are in need of Allah, but there are times when we recognize that need more. And there's no better time that you recognize that than when you feel like there are no more cards on the table, you have no options. And we say this and we allow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take the reins and do what He does best. SubhanAllah, as a result of this dua that they made, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually makes it that this battle never ends up happening and they return home safely. I can't help but think about this dua in the context of what is happening in Palestine right now. And I keep finding myself, and I'm might get emotional as I'm talking about this. I keep thinking back to years prior where we knew during Ramadan, especially, that the attacks on the Palestinians, they always ended up peaking during Ramadan. You'd end up hearing about this area was being annexed, this area was being bombed. It was happening during Ramadan, and it felt like kind of smaller skirmishes, and then eventually we'd go out and we'd protest, and then it would stop, and then you go back out, and it would just happen periodically. And then you have a situation like this: October to November to December to January to February to March to April. And it is so easy for us who are on the outside watching this happen to feel helpless. And I can't help, and I'm sure so many of you guys are feeling the same exact way. I can't help but feel so guilty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept me safe and kept me protected, while there are people that are just like me, who had hopes and dreams just like me, who wanted families or had families, who were married like I was, who have their parents who have watched their homes fall to rubble, who leave to go get groceries and come back to find their family members underneath destroyed buildings, who are having to pray the Tarawih in tents in a completely decimated city. And then you have people who have no sense of morality, who are truly shayateen walking on this earth. When Surah An-Nas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that to seek refuge in Him from min al-jinnati wan-nas, from the evil of jinn, meaning the shayateen, and from the people. And you just hear them say the most appalling things. There's no such thing as an innocent that there's no such thing as a proportional response to what happened. And I just get to this point where I think my faith in humanity has been lost significantly, because I can't help but wonder if we can actually believe that there is a moral justification for attacking a place where 50% of the population is children, that we can watch little kids, babies, have their lives taken from them, and we can say it's fine. Or you'll hear them with their cop out answer, right? The cop out answer of, it hurts me so badly that this is what we have to do. The question is, why do you feel that you have to do it? And the cognitive dissonance is very alarming, because we know factually that if this happened to the United States, this happened to the UK, if any nation decided that it would be appropriate to attack a city of the Western world, where 50% of the population was children, and to do it incessantly for 6 months straight, despite national humanitarian organizations calling for a ceasefire, despite the UN itself saying that this is now considered a full-blown humanitarian laws are being broken, the United States would wage war, the UK would wage war, countries around the world would put an end to that country. But we don't see it the same when the victims are Muslim. The world doesn't see it the same when the victims are brown, if they're not white, frankly. And that prejudice falls on the belief that the blood of a Muslim is less than the blood of anyone else. And so we are doing what we can, protesting, calling our representatives, begging them to call for a ceasefire, despite the fact that you have people literally barging into the meetings, calling and asking governors and representatives and senators to call for a ceasefire, only to get the most pathetic responses, run around, spineless response of, we need to do this and we need to do that. But you can't say can't say stop attacking innocent people. Um, we're boycotting who we can, because if we can't get our representatives, government officials who are elected by us, and this is why I have such strong feelings about the political system in the United States and participating in it. We boycott because we know it'll hit their pockets, and it's working. And you have bootlicking scholars, they're not really scholars, bootlicking Muslims trying to mock the fact that we boycott. We're donating. I can't imagine, especially this Ramadan, how much money has come from the Muslim community to try to fund aid going into Gaza, knowing that aid can't even get to Gazans in the way that they need, knowing that aid workers are being, knowing that the IDF launched fire on Palestinians who were waiting in line for food aid. If you find any means of justification for what is happening to tens of thousands of Palestinians, there's no conversation to be had, because first of all, we simply cannot have respect for spineless cowards. And if we can't come to an agreement that targeting children is immoral, unethical, and never should happen, then there's no way for a conversation to continue. But despite all of this, I'm going to say something here. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. The number of people converting to Islam is not a coincidence after October. The fact of the matter is that you can destroy their homes, you can take from them their family members, their lives, their money, their safety, their well-being, and they still stand in salah. And they still say Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. And they still say Alhamdulillah. And they still say Lakal hamdu wa shukriya Allah. And they still praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they still practice their deen. You can take everything of the dunya away, and they still have their sights set on the akhirah. There's no weapon that can destroy that. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this, that those who were warned, your enemies have mobilized their forces against you, so fear them. The warning only made them grow stronger in faith, and they replied, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. That this is only making them grow stronger. And for everyone that is being taken off this earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing someone new to Islam to replace them. You can't take away those who believe in Tawheed, those who believe in the oneness of God and worship Him alone. There's a quote that I came across years ago, years when I was a little kid. It was printed on a shirt about Palestine, because again, this is not a one-off incident, that said, the tyrant dies and his reign ends. The martyr dies and his reign begins. You can't kill a martyr. With that being said, tonight is technically the last night of Ramadan. Keep them in your du'as and keep doing what you can. And remember that the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is true. No one hurts the awliya of Allah and gets away with it. They are waging war against Allah Himself. Assalamu alaikum. I won't ask for a like. I won't ask for a comment. I won't ask for a subscribe. I will see you tomorrow, inshallah.